German Shepherd was running from people throwing stones. What baby did next? Left everyone in tears. What happened next will shock you. A 5-year-old who hadn't spoken in 3 years suddenly found his voice in the most unexpected way. But before we dive into this heartbreaking tale, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. The story you're about to listen to takes place in a quiet town called Maplewood, where nothing ever seemed to happen. Streets lined with oak trees created perfect shadows on summer afternoons, and neighbors still waved to each other from their front porches. It was the kind of place where children rode their bikes without helmets and parents didn't lock their doors at night. Maya Thompson had chosen this town specifically for its peace. As a single mother working 2 jobs, she needed somewhere safe and predictable for her son. At 28, Maya carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who had learned to fight battles alone. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were practical rather than fashionable. She worked as a nurse at the local clinic during the day and cleaned offices at night, barely making ends meet, but determined to give her son the stability she never had. But stability felt like a distant dream when it came to her 5-year-old son, Ethan. The little boy with sandy brown hair and bright green eyes had been completely silent for 3 years. Not a single word had passed his lips since he turned 2, right after his father walked out on them. Maya had taken him to countless specialists, tried every therapy imaginable, but nothing worked. Ethan would nod, shake his head, point, and sometimes make small sounds, but never spoke. The doctors called it selective mutism, triggered by trauma. Maya called it heartbreaking. Ethan was a beautiful child, with an old soul trapped in a tiny body. He had this way of looking at people that made them feel like he could see straight through to their hearts. His teachers at the local preschool adored him, even though he never participated in circle time or answered questions. He would sit quietly, drawing pictures or building blocks, always alone but never seeming lonely. Maya noticed that lately, Ethan had become even more withdrawn. He used to at least smile when she read him bedtime stories, or when they watched cartoons together. Now, he seemed to drift through each day like a ghost, present but not really there. His green eyes, once bright with curiosity, had become distant and sad. The other children in town had stopped trying to play with him. At first, they would run up to him at the park, chattering excitedly, trying to include him in their games. But when Ethan would just stare back silently, they eventually gave up and moved on to friends who could actually respond. Maya's heart shattered every time she watched this happen. Dr. Harrison, the child psychologist in the next town over, had warned Maya that Ethan might never speak again. Some children simply retreated so far into themselves that they never found their way back. The thought terrified Maya more than anything else in the world. She had already lost her husband to his inability to cope with having a broken child. She couldn't lose her son too, not like this. On this particular Tuesday morning in late September, Maya decided to take Ethan for a walk along the old hiking trail that wound around the edge of Maplewood. The leaves were just beginning to change colors, and she hoped the fresh air might spark something in her son. He had been especially distant lately, barely eating his meals and spending most of his time staring out the window. The trail was quiet except for the sound of their footsteps on the fallen leaves. Maya held Ethan's small hand in hers, feeling how cold his fingers were despite the mild weather. She talked to him as they walked, pointing out different birds and flowers, even though he never responded. She had learned to fill the silence with her own voice, hoping that somewhere inside he was listening. "Look, Ethan," she said, pointing to a red cardinal perched on a branch. "Do you remember when we saw one just like that in our backyard last week? You drew such a beautiful picture of it." Ethan glanced up briefly, but said nothing. His small face remained expressionless, as if he was watching the world from behind a thick glass wall. They had been walking for about 20 minutes when Maya heard something that made her blood run cold. It started as distant shouting, angry voices carrying through the trees. Then came the sound of running, heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. "Get back here, you stupid mutt!" a teenage voice yelled. "Yeah, run faster!" another voice laughed cruelly. Maya instinctively pulled Ethan closer to her side, unsure of what was happening, but sensing danger. The sounds were getting closer, and now she could hear something else. The desperate panting of an animal in distress. Suddenly, a massive German Shepherd burst through the trees about 50 feet ahead of them. The dog was running as fast as his legs could carry him, his tongue hanging out, eyes wide with terror. Even from a distance, Maya could see that his beautiful coat was matted with dirt and what looked like blood. Behind the dog, 3 teenage boys emerged from the trees, each carrying a handful of rocks. They were laughing as they continued to throw stones at the fleeing animal, their faces twisted with a cruelty that made Maya's stomach turn. "There he goes," one of them shouted. "Bet we can hit him from here." A rock struck the German shepherd's back leg, and the dog stumbled but kept running. Maya could see the pain in the animal's eyes, the same kind of helpless fear she sometimes saw in her son's face. "Stop it!" Maya called out, her voice shaking with anger. "Leave that dog alone!" The boys looked up, surprised to see adults on the trail. For a moment, Maya thought they might actually listen, but instead, the tallest one, a boy with dirty blonde hair and a sneer that reminded Maya of every bully she'd ever encountered, just laughed. "Mind your own business, lady," he called back. "This dog's been causing trouble all over town. We're just teaching him a lesson." Maya knew this wasn't true. She had lived in Maplewood for 3 years and had never heard of any problems with a German shepherd. These boys were just being cruel for the sake of cruelty, and something about their casual violence made her furious. But before she could respond, something incredible happened, something that would change everything. Ethan, her silent, withdrawn little boy, suddenly broke free from her grip and ran toward the terrified dog. Maya's heart stopped as she watched her son place himself directly between the German shepherd and the boys with the rocks. "Ethan, no!" Maya screamed, running after him. "Get back here!" But Ethan didn't move. He stood there, all 3 feet of him, arms spread wide like he was trying to shield the much larger dog with his tiny body. The German shepherd, who had been running in blind panic just moments before, suddenly stopped. He looked down at the small human child who had appeared out of nowhere to protect him, and something shifted in his eyes. The dog moved to stand behind Ethan, pressing his body against the little boy's back, as if seeking shelter. Maya had never seen anything like it. Her son, who barely acknowledged other people's existence, was willingly putting himself in danger to protect a complete stranger. "Get out of the way, kid," the blond boy yelled, raising another rock. "This doesn't concern you." But Ethan just stood there, staring at the boys with an intensity Maya had never seen before. His green eyes, usually so distant and unfocused, were now blazing with determination. He didn't speak. He still couldn't, but his message was clear. "You'll have to go through me first." The German shepherd seemed to understand that this child was trying to help him. Instead of running away, he stayed perfectly still behind Ethan, his breathing gradually slowing as he realized he was no longer being chased. Maya reached them just as the boys were deciding whether to throw rocks at a 5-year-old child. Her maternal instincts kicked in with a fury she didn't know she possessed. "If you even think about throwing one more stone," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "I will personally call every parent in this town and tell them exactly what kind of monsters they're raising. I know who you are, and I know where you live." This was a lie. Maya had no idea who these boys were, but her voice carried such conviction that they actually looked uncertain for the first time. "This is stupid," one of the younger boys muttered. "Let's just go." "Yeah, the dog's not worth it anyway," the third boy agreed. But the blond boy, clearly the ringleader, wasn't ready to back down. He looked at Maya with the kind of entitled arrogance that came from never facing real consequences for his actions. "You can't tell us what to do," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "This is a free country." "You're right," Maya replied calmly. "It is a free country, which means I'm free to follow you home and have a conversation with your parents about what I witnessed here today. I'm also free to call the police and report 3 minors for animal cruelty, which is a felony in this state." The boys exchanged glances. The younger 2 were clearly ready to leave, but their leader was still trying to save face. "Whatever," he finally said. "The dog's probably going to die anyway. Look at him." With that cruel parting shot, the 3 boys turned and walked away, their laughter echoing through the trees as they disappeared back into the forest. Maya knelt down next to Ethan, her hands shaking as she reached for him. She had never been more proud of her son, but she had also never been more terrified. What if those boys had actually thrown rocks at him? What if they had hurt him? "Ethan," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, what were you thinking?" Ethan turned to look at her, and for the first time in months, Maya saw something familiar in his eyes. Life, purpose, the little boy she remembered from before the silence. Behind Ethan, the German Shepherd was still shaking, but he hadn't run away. He was watching Maya with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to be assessing whether she was friend or foe. Up close, Maya could see that he was in terrible shape. His coat was matted and dirty, his ribs were visible through his fur, and there were several small cuts and bruises on his legs and face. But despite his obvious suffering, the dog was gentle. When Ethan reached out to pet him, the German Shepherd didn't flinch or growl. Instead, he leaned into the touch as if he hadn't felt kindness in a very long time. "Oh, you poor thing," Maya whispered, examining the dog more closely. "What happened to you?" The German Shepherd looked up at her, with eyes that seemed almost human in their sadness. Maya had always been good at reading animals. It was one of the reasons she had wanted to be a veterinarian before life took her in a different direction. This dog wasn't aggressive or dangerous. He was hurt, scared, and desperately in need of help. "We can't just leave him here," Maya said, more to herself than to Ethan. "Those boys might come back." Ethan looked up at her with pleading eyes. He couldn't speak to ask her to help the dog, but his expression said everything. Maya saw something in her son's face that she hadn't seen in years: hope. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, we'll take him home, just for tonight, until we can figure out what to do." The walk back to their small house was slow and careful. The German Shepherd limped badly on his back left leg, the one that had been hit by the rock. Maya kept expecting him to run away, but he stayed close to Ethan, as if the little boy was his anchor in a world that had been nothing but cruel to him. Ethan walked beside the dog, his small hand resting on the animal's neck. Maya watched in amazement as her son, who usually showed no interest in anything around him, stayed perfectly in step with their new companion. It was as if some invisible connection had formed between them in those few minutes on the trail. When they reached the house, Maya realized she had no idea how to care for an injured dog. She had some basic first aid supplies, but nothing specifically for animals. The dog needed professional medical attention, but the local vet was expensive, and Maya was already struggling to pay her bills. "Let's get him some water first," she said, leading them into the small kitchen. The German Shepherd drank deeply from the bowl Maya set down, his tail wagging slightly for the first time since they'd found him. Ethan sat on the floor next to him, watching every movement with fascination. As Maya watched her son interact with the dog, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For 3 years, she had tried everything to reach Ethan, to bring him back from wherever he had retreated to, inside his own mind. Nothing had worked, but this dog, this broken, hurt animal, had somehow accomplished in minutes what years of therapy couldn't do. Ethan was present in a way she hadn't seen since he was 2 years old. His eyes were bright and focused, his body language open and engaged. He was still silent, but there was a quality to his silence now that felt different. Instead of the empty quiet of withdrawal, this felt like the purposeful quiet of someone who was thinking, planning, caring. Maya made a decision that would change all their lives. She was going to find a way to help this dog, even if it meant sacrificing something else. Because for the first time in 3 years, she saw her son truly alive. That night, Maya barely slept. The German Shepherd had curled up on an old blanket in the corner of the living room, and Ethan had insisted on sleeping on the couch nearby. Maya had tried to convince him to go to his own bed, but for the first time in months, Ethan had actually resisted her guidance. He shook his head firmly and pointed to the dog, making it clear he wasn't leaving his new friend alone. Maya watched from the hallway as Ethan lay on the couch, one small hand hanging down to rest on the dog's head. The German Shepherd seemed to understand that this child was his protector. Every few minutes, he would lift his head to check that Ethan was still there, as if afraid his guardian angel might disappear. Around 3 in the morning, Maya was startled awake by a sound she hadn't heard in years. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but as she lay in her bed listening, she heard it again. Ethan was humming. It was soft and barely audible, but it was definitely her son's voice making music. Maya crept to the living room doorway and peered around the corner. Ethan was sitting up on the couch, gently stroking the German Shepherd's fur, while humming a lullaby that Maya used to sing to him when he was a baby. The dog's eyes were closed, but his tail was tapping gently against the floor in rhythm with the melody. Tears streamed down Maya's face as she watched this impossible scene. Her silent son was singing to comfort a wounded animal. After 3 years of therapy sessions, doctor visits, and desperate attempts to reach him, a stray dog had accomplished what no human could do. When morning came, Maya called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She couldn't leave Ethan and the dog alone, and she knew they needed to find proper medical care for the animal. The German Shepherd was moving better than he had the night before, but Maya could see that several of his wounds needed professional attention. She called the local veterinary clinic, but when she explained that she had found a stray dog and needed help, the receptionist's response was discouraging. "We'll need payment up front for any treatment," the woman said in a bored voice. "Stray animals require full payment before we can see them. The examination alone will be $200, and that's before any actual treatment." Maya felt her heart sink. $200 might as well have been $2,000. After paying rent, utilities, and groceries, she usually had less than $50 left each month. She had been hoping the vet might work with her on a payment plan, but the receptionist made it clear that wasn't an option. "I understand," Maya said quietly. "Thank you for your time." As she hung up the phone, Maya noticed Ethan watching her with those intelligent green eyes. He seemed to understand that something was wrong, that the help they needed for his new friend wasn't going to be easy to find. But Maya wasn't ready to give up. She spent the morning calling every animal shelter and rescue organization within 50 miles. Most of them were full and not taking new animals. The few that had space wanted her to surrender the dog immediately, which would mean Ethan would lose the first thing that had brought him back to life in 3 years. It was while she was making her 10th phone call that something extraordinary happened. Maya was on hold with a rescue organization in the next county when she heard a sound that made her drop the phone. From the living room came a small, scratchy voice that she hadn't heard in so long she had almost forgotten what it sounded like. "Buddy," Ethan whispered to the German Shepherd. "Good buddy." Maya ran to the living room, hardly daring to believe what she had heard. Ethan was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to the dog, his small hands gently examining one of the animal's injured paws. The German Shepherd was lying perfectly still, trusting this little boy completely. "Ethan?" Maya said softly, kneeling down beside them. "Did you just speak?" Ethan looked up at her, and for a moment, Maya thought he might retreat back into his silence. But instead, he pointed to the dog and repeated the word, slightly louder this time. "Buddy!" Maya's hands were shaking as she reached out to touch her son's face. "Yes, baby. Buddy. That's a perfect name for him." Ethan smiled then, the first real smile Maya had seen from him since his father left. It was small and tentative, but it was genuine. He looked back at the dog and said the name again, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "Buddy hurt," Ethan said, his voice still barely above a whisper. Maya nearly collapsed with joy. 3 words. Her son had spoken 3 words, and they weren't random sounds or meaningless babble. He was communicating about something that mattered to him, expressing concern for another living being. "Yes, sweetie," Maya said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Buddy is hurt. We're going to help him get better." Ethan nodded seriously, then looked back at the dog. "Buddy stay?" The question broke Maya's heart because she honestly didn't know the answer. They couldn't afford veterinary care. They lived in a small rental house with a landlord who might not allow pets, and Maya had no idea how to properly care for a large dog. But looking at her son's hopeful face, she knew she had to find a way. "We'll figure it out," she promised. "Buddy can stay as long as he needs to." Over the next few days, something magical began to happen. Ethan, who had been like a ghost for 3 years, started to come back to life. He still didn't speak much, but when he did, it was usually to Buddy or about Buddy. He would whisper to the dog about his drawings, tell him about the birds they saw outside the window, and even attempt to sing the songs Maya played on the radio. Buddy, meanwhile, was recovering faster than Maya had expected. His limp was improving, his wounds were healing cleanly, and his coat was starting to shine now that he was getting regular meals and clean water. But more importantly, the fear in his eyes was being replaced by something Maya had never seen in a stray animal before: absolute devotion. Buddy followed Ethan everywhere. When the little boy sat at the kitchen table to eat breakfast, Buddy lay at his feet. When Ethan watched cartoons on the couch, Buddy curled up beside him. When Ethan went to bed at night, Buddy stationed himself like a guard dog outside the bedroom door. Maya began to understand that this wasn't just a boy and his pet. This was something deeper, something almost spiritual. Buddy seemed to sense that Ethan was fragile, that he needed protection not from physical danger, but from a world that had hurt him too deeply. In return, Ethan was giving Buddy the unconditional love and acceptance that the dog had probably never experienced before. It was during Buddy's second week with them that Maya made a discovery that changed everything. She had been giving Buddy his weekly bath in the backyard, using the garden hose and some gentle shampoo she had bought with her grocery money. Buddy was patient and cooperative, seeming to enjoy the attention and the feeling of being clean. As Maya worked the shampoo through his thick fur, her fingers encountered something unusual near the base of his neck. At first, she thought it was just a scar or a patch of thicker fur, but when she looked more closely, she realized it was something artificial. Hidden beneath Buddy's fur, almost invisible unless you were specifically looking for it, was a small metal tag sewn directly into his collar. But this wasn't a normal pet identification tag. It was made of some kind of dull silver metal, about the size of a quarter, and it was covered with numbers and symbols that Maya didn't recognize. The tag read, K9 to 7741, classified return to base immediately. Below that were a series of numbers and letters that looked like some kind of code. Proj MindBridge Phase 3 active. Maya's blood ran cold as she stared at the tag. This wasn't just a lost pet. This was something much more serious, something that involved words like classified and project. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. She thought about the way Buddy had appeared in the woods, running from those teenage boys. Had he been running from more than just cruel children? Was someone looking for him? And if so, what would happen when they found him? Maya's hands were shaking as she finished Buddy's bath. She dried him off carefully, making sure the mysterious tag was completely hidden beneath his fur. Buddy seemed to sense her anxiety because he pressed closer to her than usual, his warm brown eyes searching her face for reassurance. That evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Maya sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, staring at the cryptic information from Buddy's tag. She wasn't sure what to do with what she had discovered. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to pretend she had never seen the tag, and continue living in the bubble of happiness that Buddy had created for her family. But another part of her, the part that had spent years fighting for answers about her son's condition, knew she couldn't ignore this. If Buddy was some kind of government or military animal, there were probably people looking for him, people who might not care about the miraculous effect he was having on a traumatized little boy. After debating with herself for an hour, Maya decided to do some research. She created an anonymous account on a forum dedicated to military and government conspiracy theories. It felt ridiculous, but she didn't know where else to turn. She posted a carefully worded question. Has anyone heard of a government project called MindBridge, looking for information about classified K9 programs? Maya expected to wait days for a response, if she got one at all. But within 20 minutes, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had replied to her post. The response made her blood freeze. Delete this post immediately. Stop looking into this. You're in danger. Maya stared at the message, her heart pounding. Before she could decide how to respond, another message appeared. They monitor these forums. If you found one of their animals, get rid of it now. They will come for it. Then a third message from a different user. MindBridge was shut down 3 years ago after the test subjects started showing signs of enhanced intelligence. The surviving animals were supposed to be terminated. If you have one, you need to know that it's not just a dog anymore. Maya's hands were shaking so badly, she could barely type her response. What do you mean, not just a dog? The answer came quickly. Enhanced cognitive abilities. Some could understand human speech at an advanced level. Others showed signs of telepathic connections with their handlers. The program was shut down because the animals became too intelligent, too unpredictable. They knew they were being experimented on. Maya felt sick to her stomach. She looked toward the living room, where Buddy was sleeping peacefully next to the couch where Ethan would join him in a few hours. Was it possible that Buddy wasn't just an unusually intelligent dog? Could he actually understand everything that was happening around him? As if summoned by her thoughts, Buddy appeared in the kitchen doorway. He walked over to Maya and sat down beside her chair, looking up at her with those deep brown eyes that suddenly seemed far too knowing for a normal animal. Buddy, Maya whispered, what are you? Buddy tilted his head, studying her face. Then he did something that made Maya's heart skip a beat. He placed his paw on her laptop keyboard, gently but deliberately, as if he understood exactly what she had been reading. Maya stared at him in shock. You know, don't you? You know what you are. Buddy's tail wagged once, slowly, and Maya could have sworn she saw something almost human in his expression. Understanding, sadness, and maybe even gratitude. Over the next few days, Maya began to notice things about Buddy that she had previously attributed to normal dog intelligence. He seemed to understand complex conversations, not just simple commands. When Maya talked to Ethan about their daily schedule, Buddy would position himself by the door at exactly the right time for their walks. When Maya mentioned that they were running low on dog food, Buddy led her to the kitchen cabinet where she kept his bowls. Most significantly, Buddy seemed to understand Ethan's condition in a way that even Maya sometimes didn't. He knew when the little boy was about to have one of his withdrawing episodes and would position himself as a calming presence. He seemed to sense when Ethan was struggling to find words and would wait patiently, never pressuring or demanding attention. It was as if Buddy could read Ethan's mind. The thought terrified Maya, but she couldn't deny what she was seeing. Her son was making progress at a rate that defied everything the doctors had told her about selective mutism. Ethan was speaking more each day, always to Buddy first, then gradually including Maya in their conversations. "Buddy wants water," Ethan would say, and sure enough, Buddy's water bowl would be empty. "Buddy says it's time for a walk," Ethan announced one afternoon, and when Maya looked outside, she realized it was exactly the time they usually took their daily walk. Maya began to suspect that the communication between Ethan and Buddy went both ways. It was as if they had formed some kind of connection that transcended normal human-animal relationships. The forum posts had mentioned telepathic abilities among the MindBridge test subjects. Was it possible that Buddy was somehow communicating directly with her son's mind? The idea should have been impossible to believe, but Maya had seen too many inexplicable things over the past few weeks to dismiss anything as impossible. Her mute son was talking. A stray dog with mysterious military tags had appeared in their lives at exactly the moment when they needed hope most. And now that dog seemed to understand things that no ordinary animal could comprehend. Maya realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could continue pretending that Buddy was just an unusually smart dog who had wandered into their lives by chance. Or she could accept that something extraordinary was happening, something that might put all of them in danger, but had already given her back her son. As she watched Ethan and Buddy playing in the backyard, both of them more alive and happy than she had seen them, since they found each other, Maya made her choice. Whatever Buddy was, wherever he had come from, he belonged with them now. She would protect him the same way he was protecting Ethan. But deep down, Maya knew that their peaceful existence was living on borrowed time. Sooner or later, whoever had created Buddy would come looking for him, and when that day came, she would have to be ready to fight for her family. What Maya didn't know was that day would come much sooner than she expected. Someone had already been watching their house, taking notes on their daily routines, and planning the best way to reclaim their lost asset. The peaceful life she was trying to build was about to be shattered in ways she couldn't imagine. Tell us in the comments, do you think Maya made the right choice keeping Buddy despite the danger? What would you have done in her situation? Maya's instincts proved correct sooner than she expected. It was a Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks after they had found Buddy, when everything began to unravel. Maya was getting ready for work while Ethan sat at the kitchen table, sharing his cereal with Buddy in the way that had become their morning routine. "Buddy likes the banana pieces," Ethan said, carefully picking out the sliced bananas from his bowl and offering them to the dog. His vocabulary had expanded dramatically over the past few weeks. Complete sentences were becoming more common, and his voice was getting stronger and more confident each day. Maya smiled as she watched them. These simple morning conversations were miracles she had never expected to witness. Dr. Harrison had warned her that children with selective mutism rarely made such rapid progress, especially without intensive therapy. But here was Ethan, chattering away to Buddy about everything from his favorite cartoons to the weather outside. "We need to leave in 10 minutes, Maya said, checking her watch. She had finally returned to work after taking several days off, and her supervisor at the clinic had not been happy about her absence. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not when she was already struggling to pay for the extra food and supplies that caring for Buddy required. As Maya gathered her purse and keys, she noticed Buddy behaving strangely. The dog was standing at the living room window, his body tense and alert, in a way she hadn't seen since those first few days when he had been recovering from his injuries. His ears were pricked forward, and a low rumble was coming from his throat. "What is it, boy?" Maya asked, walking over to the window. At first, she didn't see anything unusual. Their quiet street looked the same as always. Mrs. Peterson was watering her garden across the street, and old Mr. Williams was walking his ancient beagle. But then Maya noticed something that made her stomach clench with anxiety. A black sedan was parked at the end of the block, in a spot where she had never seen a car before. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, and something about the vehicle's presence felt wrong. It was too clean, too official looking for their modest neighborhood. Probably just someone visiting, Maya told herself. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the car was somehow connected to them. Buddy's growling grew louder, and when Maya looked down at him, she saw something in his eyes that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't just alertness or concern. It was recognition. Buddy knew that car, or at least knew what it represented. "Ethan, come away from the table," Maya said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need to go." But as they prepared to leave for school and work, Maya noticed that the black sedan had moved. It was now parked directly across the street from their house, and she could see the silhouette of at least one person sitting in the driver's seat. Maya's hands were shaking as she helped Ethan put on his backpack. Every instinct she had was screaming that something was wrong, that they were being watched. She thought about the forum warnings she had received, about people monitoring for information about the MindBridge project. "Change of plans," Maya said suddenly. "You're not going to school today." Ethan looked up at her with confusion. "Why not? It's Thursday. We have art class." Maya knelt down to his level, trying to think of how to explain without frightening him. Sometimes grown-ups need to make quick decisions to keep their families safe. Today is one of those days. Ethan seemed to accept this explanation, but Buddy was becoming increasingly agitated. The dog moved from window to window, tracking something that Maya couldn't see. His behavior was so focused and purposeful that Maya began to wonder if his enhanced abilities included senses that went far beyond normal canine capabilities. Maya called in sick to work again, knowing that this might cost her the job, but unable to leave when every fiber of her being was telling her that danger was approaching. She spent the morning trying to act normal while keeping watch out the windows, but the black sedan remained in place, silent and ominous. Around noon, Maya's worst fears were realized. A man in a dark suit got out of the sedan and began walking toward their house. He was tall and thin, with the kind of precise posture that suggested military training. Even from a distance, Maya could see that he carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what he wanted. Buddy's reaction was immediate and intense. The dog began pacing frantically, his breathing rapid and shallow. He looked at Maya with eyes that seemed to be begging her to understand something urgent. "What is it, Buddy?" Maya whispered. "What do you need me to know?" But before Buddy could communicate whatever he was trying to tell her, the doorbell rang. The sound seemed to echo through the house like a death knell. Maya looked through the peephole and saw the man from the sedan standing on her front porch. He was holding what appeared to be some kind of official identification, and his expression was all business. This was not a social call. "Mrs. Thompson," the man called through the door, "my name is Agent Morrison. I'm with a government agency that tracks lost federal property. I need to speak with you about a dog that was reported missing from a classified facility." Maya's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure the man could hear it through the door. She looked back at Ethan, who was sitting on the couch with Buddy pressed close against his side. Her son's face was pale with fear, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya called back, her voice shakier than she wanted it to be. "Ma'am, I have reliable information that you're currently harboring a German Shepherd that belongs to the United States government," Agent Morrison replied. "I'm going to need you to open the door so we can discuss this situation." Maya's mind raced. She could pretend Buddy wasn't there, but the man obviously already knew about the dog. She could refuse to open the door, but that would probably just result in more agents and possibly a warrant. Or she could try to talk her way out of this, though she had no idea what she could possibly say. "Mommy," Ethan's small voice cut through her panic. "Why is the man here for Buddy?" Maya looked at her son, and something in his expression told her that he understood more about this situation than a 5-year-old should. Ethan wasn't just scared, he was devastated. He knew they were about to lose Buddy, and the light that had returned to his eyes over the past few weeks was already starting to dim. "Mrs. Thompson," Agent Morrison called again, his voice taking on a more authoritative tone. "I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm going to assume you need assistance opening the door." Maya realized she was out of options. She couldn't hide from this forever, and she couldn't put Ethan through the trauma of having armed agents break down their door. With trembling hands, she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just wide enough to speak to the man on her porch. Agent Morrison was exactly what Maya had expected: cold, professional, and completely unsympathetic to her situation. He was probably in his 40s, with gray hair cut in a precise military style, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said, though Maya hadn't cooperated with anything yet. "I assume the animal is inside?" "He's not an animal," Maya said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "He's part of our family." Agent Morrison's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, what you have in your house is government property worth approximately $2 million in research and development costs. The animal was reported missing 3 weeks ago from a classified facility, and we've been tracking him ever since." "Tracking him how?" Maya demanded. "The subject has a subcutaneous GPS chip that activates when he remains in one location for more than 72 hours, Morrison explained. "We've been monitoring this address since the chip came online." Maya felt sick. They had known where Buddy was almost from the beginning, but they had waited 3 weeks to come for him. Why? What had they been waiting for? As if reading her mind, Morrison continued. "We wanted to observe the subject's behavior in a domestic environment. The data we've collected over the past few weeks has been quite valuable for our research." The cold calculation in his voice made Maya's anger flare. "You've been watching my son. You've been using him as part of your experiment." "Your son was never in any danger," Morrison said dismissively. "We were simply gathering behavioral data, but now it's time for the subject to return to the facility where he belongs." "His name is Buddy," Maya said fiercely, "and he doesn't belong in any facility. He belongs with us." Morrison stepped closer, and Maya instinctively moved to block his view into the house. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand that you've grown attached to the subject, but you need to understand the legal reality of your situation. You are currently in possession of stolen government property. If you cooperate and turn over the animal voluntarily, no charges will be filed. If you refuse, I will be forced to involve local law enforcement and potentially federal prosecutors." Maya's mind was racing, trying to think of some way out of this nightmare. "What kind of experiments were you doing on him?" "That information is classified," Morrison replied. "But I can tell you that the subject is not a normal dog. The enhancements that were made to his cognitive abilities make him potentially dangerous in an uncontrolled environment." "Dangerous?" Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Buddy wouldn't hurt a fly. He's been nothing but gentle and loving with my son." "The subject's current behavior is irrelevant," Morrison said coldly. "What matters is his potential for unpredictable actions as his enhancements continue to develop. We need to monitor him in a controlled environment to ensure public safety." Maya realized that this man saw Buddy as nothing more than a test subject, a piece of equipment that had malfunctioned and needed to be retrieved. The idea that Buddy had feelings, that he had formed genuine bonds with her family, was completely foreign to Morrison's way of thinking. "I need to see some identification," Maya said, stalling for time while she tried to figure out what to do. Morrison held up a badge and ID card, but the agency name was partially redacted, and Maya couldn't make out most of the details. It looked official enough, but she had no way of verifying its authenticity. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to need you to step aside so I can retrieve the subject," Morrison said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "No," Maya said, the word coming out stronger than she felt. "You can't just take him. He's not property. He's a living being with feelings and relationships." Morrison's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm trying to handle this situation with minimal disruption to your family, but you're making that very difficult. The subject will be coming with me today, one way or another." It was at that moment that Ethan appeared beside Maya, having crept up while she was focused on the agent. Buddy was right behind him, pressed close to the little boy's side. When Morrison saw the dog, his eyes lit up with the satisfaction of someone who had finally located a valuable piece of lost equipment. "There's our missing subject," Morrison said, reaching into his jacket. Maya tensed, fearing he might be going for a weapon, but instead he pulled out what looked like a high-tech collar with several blinking lights. "This is a neural control device," Morrison explained, as if he were discussing the weather. "It will allow us to manage the subject's behavior during transport and prevent any aggressive actions." Maya looked down at Buddy and saw something that broke her heart. The dog was trembling, not with cold or excitement, but with pure terror. His eyes were fixed on the device in Morrison's hands, and Maya could see that he knew exactly what it was and what it would do to him. "You're not putting that thing on him," Maya said, stepping protectively in front of Buddy. "Mrs. Thompson, you are interfering with a federal operation," Morrison warned. "I strongly advise you to reconsider your position." It was then that Ethan did something that surprised everyone, including Maya. Her quiet, withdrawn little boy stepped forward and looked directly at Agent Morrison with a courage that seemed far beyond his 5 years. "You can't take Buddy," Ethan said, his voice clear and strong. "He's my friend." Morrison looked askance at Ethan with barely concealed irritation. "Son, this is an adult matter. The animal needs to come with me for everyone's safety." "He's not dangerous," Ethan insisted. "Buddy saved me. He helped me find my voice." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she listened to her son defend his friend. This was the most she had ever heard Ethan speak to a stranger, and he was doing it to protect Buddy. Morrison, however, seemed unmoved by the child's plea. "The subject's current behavior is not indicative of his long-term potential. We have protocols in place for a reason." "What protocols?" Maya demanded. "What exactly are you planning to do to him?" Morrison's silence was more frightening than any answer he could have given. Maya realized that whatever they had planned for Buddy, it wasn't something they wanted to discuss with civilians. "I'm going to give you one final opportunity to cooperate," Morrison said, his voice taking on a threatening edge. "Hand over the subject voluntarily, or I will be forced to call for backup and handle this situation through other means." Maya looked down at Ethan, who was holding onto Buddy's fur with both hands, as if he could physically prevent anyone from taking his friend away. She thought about all the progress her son had made, all the words he had spoken, all the life that had returned to his eyes because of this extraordinary dog. Then she looked at Buddy, who was watching her, with those impossibly intelligent brown eyes. In that moment, Maya could swear that the dog was trying to communicate something to her, some kind of plan or hope that didn't involve surrendering to the people who saw him as nothing more than a failed experiment. Maya made a decision that would change everything. She was not going to let them take Buddy without a fight. Whatever the consequences, whatever the risks, she could not stand by and watch them destroy the miracle that had saved her son. "No," Maya said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You're not taking him. Not today, not ever." Morrison's expression turned cold and dangerous. "Mrs. Thompson, you have just made a very serious mistake." He reached for his phone, presumably to call for backup. But before he could dial, something unexpected happened. Buddy stepped forward, positioning himself between Morrison and the family he had chosen to protect. The dog's demeanor changed completely, and for the first time since Maya had known him, Buddy looked truly dangerous. Morrison froze, his hand still on his phone. "The subject is displaying aggressive behavior," he said, though Maya could hear uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "He's protecting his family," Maya replied, "just like any normal dog would do." But even as she said it, Maya knew that what she was seeing wasn't normal dog behavior. Buddy's eyes were fixed on Morrison with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. It was as if the dog was reading the agent's thoughts, anticipating his next move before he made it. Morrison tried to take a step forward, but Buddy's low growl stopped him in his tracks. There was something in that sound that spoke of intelligence and purpose far beyond normal animal instincts. "This is exactly why the subject needs to be returned to the facility," Morrison said, though he made no further attempt to approach. "His enhancements make him unpredictable and potentially dangerous." Maya realized that they had reached a stalemate. Morrison couldn't safely approach Buddy, but he also wasn't going to give up and leave. It was only a matter of time before he called for reinforcements, and then Maya would be facing multiple agents instead of just one. She needed to buy time, needed to figure out some way to protect her family and the dog who had become such an important part of their lives. But what could one single mother do against the full power of a government agency? As if sensing her desperation, Buddy turned his head slightly and looked at Maya with eyes that seemed to be trying to tell her something important. In that moment, Maya remembered something from her online research, references to the MindBridge subjects having enhanced communication abilities. Could Buddy actually be trying to communicate with her telepathically? The idea seemed impossible, but after everything she had witnessed over the past few weeks, Maya was willing to consider any possibility. She focused her thoughts on Buddy, trying to open her mind to whatever he might be trying to tell her. At first, there was nothing but her own racing thoughts and fear. But then, gradually, Maya began to sense something else. Not words exactly, but emotions and images that didn't feel like her own. Maya saw flashes of memory that couldn't be hers: sterile laboratory rooms, other dogs in cages, men in white coats conducting painful experiments. She felt Buddy's terror and confusion, his desperate longing for freedom and kindness. And underneath it all, she sensed his fierce determination to protect Ethan at any cost. The connection lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to convince Maya that the forum posts had been right. Buddy wasn't just an enhanced dog. He was something entirely new, a being caught between animal and something far more complex. And the government agents who had created him wanted him back so they could continue their experiments, regardless of what that meant for Buddy's well-being or happiness. Maya looked at Agent Morrison, who was still standing frozen on her doorstep, clearly uncertain about how to proceed in the face of Buddy's protective stance. She realized that this man represented everything that was wrong with the MindBridge project: the willingness to treat sentient beings as objects, to prioritize scientific advancement over basic compassion. "He's never going back to your laboratory," Maya said quietly. "Whatever you did to him there, whatever experiments you want to continue, it's over." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Thompson, you have no idea what you're dealing with. The subject is government property, and interfering with federal operations is a serious crime." "Then arrest me," Maya said, surprising herself with her own courage. "But you're not taking Buddy?" What happened next would test every ounce of courage Maya possessed, and force her to make choices she had never imagined she would face. The battle for Buddy's freedom was just beginning. Drop a comment below. What do you think Maya should do next? Is there any way she can win against a government agency? The standoff with Agent Morrison lasted another tense minute before Maya realized they needed to get out of there immediately. The agent had his phone in his hand, clearly preparing to call for backup, and Maya knew that once reinforcements arrived, their chances of escape would be zero. "Ethan," Maya said quietly, never taking her eyes off Morrison, "go to your room and pack your backpack with clothes for 3 days. Include your favorite stuffed animal and your medication." "But Mom," Ethan started to protest. "Now, sweetheart," Maya said firmly, "we're going on an adventure." Ethan seemed to understand the gravity of the situation because he didn't argue further. He hurried down the hallway with Buddy close behind him, leaving Maya alone with the government agent. Morrison watched them go, his expression calculating. "Mrs. Thompson, running will only make this situation worse for you and your son. The subject will be recovered regardless of what you do." "His name is Buddy," Maya repeated, buying time while she formulated a plan. "And you're wrong about him being dangerous. He's been nothing but protective and loving." "You've observed him for 3 weeks," Morrison replied coldly. "We've been studying his kind for 3 years. Trust me when I tell you that you don't know what he's capable of." Maya's blood ran cold at the phrase, "his kind." How many dogs like Buddy were there? How many had been subjected to whatever experiments had created such enhanced intelligence? "What did you do to them?" Maya asked, genuinely curious despite the danger. Morrison's expression flickered for just a moment, and Maya caught a glimpse of something that might have been regret or guilt, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "That's classified information," he said. "What matters now is that the subject needs to return to a controlled environment where his abilities can be properly monitored." Maya could hear movement from Ethan's bedroom, and she hoped her son was following her instructions. She needed to keep Morrison talking long enough for them to prepare their escape. "What abilities exactly?" Maya pressed. "The enhanced intelligence? The way he seems to understand complex conversations? Or something more?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Thompson, you're asking questions about matters of national security. I strongly advise you to stop." But Maya was beginning to understand that Morrison's reluctance to discuss Buddy's abilities wasn't just about classification levels. There was something about the MindBridge project that the agent himself was uncomfortable with. "You created something you couldn't control, didn't you?" Maya said, reading between the lines. "That's why the project was shut down. The dogs became too intelligent, too aware of what was being done to them." Morrison's silence was more telling than any answer he could have given. It was at that moment that Maya heard a car door slam somewhere down the street. Her heart sank as she realized that Morrison's backup was already arriving. Through the front window, she could see a second black sedan pulling up behind the first one. "Time's up, Mrs. Thompson," Morrison said, his voice taking on a note of satisfaction. My colleagues are here to assist with the retrieval. Maya's mind raced. She couldn't let them take Buddy back to whatever nightmare he had escaped from, but she also couldn't put Ethan in danger by trying to fight trained government agents. "Ethan," Maya called down the hallway, "we need to go now." Her son appeared at the end of the hallway with his backpack on and Buddy by his side. Maya could see the fear in Ethan's eyes, but also determination. Her little boy understood that they were fighting for something important. "The back door," Maya whispered to them, hoping Morrison couldn't hear. "Go to the car and wait for me." But as Ethan and Buddy headed toward the kitchen, Maya heard footsteps on her back porch. Morrison's backup hadn't just arrived. They had already surrounded the house. "There's nowhere to run, Mrs. Thompson," Morrison said calmly. "My team has secured the perimeter. The best thing you can do now is cooperate." Maya felt trapped, but she wasn't ready to give up. She thought about her sister Emma, who lived about an hour away in the mountains. Emma was a veterinary technician who had always been supportive of Maya's struggles with Ethan. If anyone would help them, it would be Emma. But first, they had to get out of the house. Maya walked quickly to the kitchen, where she found Ethan and Buddy waiting by the back door. Through the window, she could see at least 2 more agents positioned in her backyard. "We're surrounded," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up at her with wide eyes. "What do we do, Mommy?" Before Maya could answer, Buddy moved to the back door and began making a low, almost inaudible sound. It wasn't quite a whine or a growl. It was something else entirely, something that seemed to vibrate at a frequency that Maya could feel in her bones. Suddenly, the behavior of the agents outside changed. Maya watched in amazement as the 2 men in her backyard began looking around in confusion, as if they had lost track of something important. One of them pulled out a radio and began speaking urgently into it. "What's happening?" Maya whispered to Buddy. The dog looked up at her with those impossibly intelligent eyes, and Maya had the strangest sensation that he was trying to tell her something, not through their telepathic connection this time, but through his actions. Buddy moved to the kitchen window and began making the same strange sound again. This time, Maya could see its effect more clearly. The agents outside seemed to be experiencing some kind of disorientation, like they couldn't quite focus on their surroundings. "Is he doing something to them?" Maya asked herself, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. The answer came in the form of Morrison's voice from the front of the house. "Team 2, report your status. What's your current position?" The radio crackled with confused responses. We're not sure, sir. We seem to have lost visual on the target location." Maya's eyes widened as she began to understand what was happening. Buddy wasn't just enhanced in terms of intelligence. He had abilities that went far beyond anything she had imagined. He was somehow affecting the agents' perception, making them unable to focus on the house or their mission. "Can you keep doing that?" Maya whispered to Buddy. The dog's tail wagged once, and Maya took that as a yes. Whatever Buddy was doing, it was buying them time and confusion among their pursuers. "Ethan, we're going to walk very quietly to the garage," Maya said. "Stay close to Buddy and don't make any noise." They moved through the house like ghosts, with Buddy leading the way. Every few steps, he would pause and make that strange sound again, and Maya could hear the continued confusion in the agent's radio communications. "Sir, we're having some kind of technical difficulty," one agent reported. "Our positioning systems seem to be malfunctioning." "All units, reset and re-establish perimeter," Morrison ordered, but his voice sounded frustrated and uncertain. Maya, Ethan, and Buddy made it to the garage without being detected. Maya's car was old and not particularly reliable, but it was their only hope of escape. She opened the car doors as quietly as possible and helped Ethan into the back seat with Buddy. "Stay down and don't make any noise," Maya whispered to them. Maya started the car and held her breath as the engine turned over. It seemed impossibly loud in the quiet garage, and she was sure the agents would hear it. But when she opened the garage door with the remote, the agents were still wandering around looking confused and disoriented. Maya backed out of the garage slowly, trying not to draw attention to the moving vehicle. Buddy was still making his strange sound, and Maya could see that the effect on the agents was holding. They seemed to be looking right through the car as if it wasn't there. Once they were clear of the immediate area, Maya drove as quickly as she dared toward the highway that would take them to Emma's house in the mountains. Her hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and she kept checking the rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. "Are we safe now?" Ethan asked from the back seat. "For now," Maya replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. We're going to visit Aunt Emma for a few days. Ethan seemed to accept this explanation, but Maya could see in the mirror that he was holding tightly to Buddy's fur. The dog had stopped making his strange sound once they were away from the house, but he remained alert and watchful. Maya used her phone to call Emma while she drove, praying that her sister would answer. After 3 rings, Emma's familiar voice came through the speaker. "Maya, this is a surprise. How are you and Ethan?" "Emma, I need your help," Maya said, cutting straight to the point. "We're in trouble, and we need somewhere safe to stay for a few days." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of trouble?" Maya glanced in the rearview mirror at Ethan and Buddy. How could she possibly explain the situation without sounding completely insane? "It's complicated," Maya said finally, "but we're not safe at home right now. Can we come stay with you?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Of course. You know you're always welcome here. How soon can you be here?" "We're already on the way," Maya replied. "We should be there in about an hour." "I'll get the guest room ready," Emma said. "And Maya, whatever is going on, we'll figure it out together." Maya felt tears of relief and gratitude streaming down her face. "Thank you, Emma. I don't know what I'd do without you." The drive to Emma's house took them through winding mountain roads that Maya had traveled many times before. The familiar scenery should have been comforting, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Every car behind them seemed suspicious. Every helicopter overhead seemed like it might be searching for them. Buddy seemed to sense her anxiety because he moved closer to the front seat, resting his head near Maya's shoulder. The contact was comforting in a way that Maya couldn't fully explain. "Buddy knows we're scared," Ethan said softly. "He wants to help us feel better." Maya glanced at her son in the mirror. "How do you know that?" Ethan shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "He tells me things, not with words, but I can feel what he's thinking." Maya's heart skipped a beat. If Ethan was developing some kind of telepathic connection with Buddy, it meant that the dog's abilities were somehow affecting her son. She didn't know if that was dangerous or beneficial, but it was certainly beyond anything she had imagined when they first found Buddy on the trail. They reached Emma's house just as the sun was beginning to set. Emma lived in a small cabin nestled among pine trees, about 5 miles from the nearest town. It was isolated and peaceful, exactly the kind of place where they might be able to hide for a while. Emma was waiting on the front porch when they arrived, and she hurried down to help them unload the car. Maya's sister was 2 years older, and had always been the more practical one of the two. She was wearing her usual work clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, and her long brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail. "Oh my goodness," Emma said when she saw Buddy. "You didn't tell me you had gotten a dog. He's beautiful." "It's a long story," Maya replied, looking around nervously. "Can we get inside first?" Emma led them into the cozy cabin, and Maya immediately felt safer. The thick log walls and remote location made it feel like a fortress compared to their vulnerable house in town. "Now," Emma said once they were all settled in the living room, "tell me what's really going on." Maya took a deep breath and began to explain everything. Finding Buddy on the trail, the mysterious tag, the online research, and finally the confrontation with Agent Morrison. She watched Emma's expression change from concern to disbelief to alarm as the story unfolded. "Maya," Emma said when she finished, "this sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting what happened?" "Look at this," Maya said, pulling out her phone and showing Emma the photos she had taken of Buddy's hidden tag. "This is real. The MindBridge project, the government agents, all of it." Emma studied the photos carefully. As a veterinary technician, she had seen plenty of identification tags, but nothing like this one. "The tag is definitely government issue," Emma admitted, "and the technology looks advanced. But, Maya, if this is really a classified government project, then you're in serious danger. These people aren't going to just forget about you." "I know," Maya said, "but I couldn't let them take Buddy back to whatever hell they had him in before. He's not just a dog, Emma. He's more." As if to demonstrate her point, Buddy approached Emma and sat down directly in front of her. He looked up at her with those intelligent brown eyes and tilted his head in a way that seemed almost like a formal introduction. Emma stared at Buddy in fascination. "There is something different about him," she said slowly. "I've worked with hundreds of dogs, and I've never seen one with this kind of presence." "He saved Ethan," Maya said. "My son hadn't spoken in 3 years, and Buddy brought him back to life. I can't let them take him away." Emma reached out to pet Buddy, and the dog leaned into her touch in a way that conveyed gratitude and trust. "Okay," Emma said finally, "I believe you, and I'll help however I can." "Thank you," Maya said, feeling a huge weight lift from her shoulders. "But we need to be realistic about this situation," Emma continued. "If these government agents are as determined as you say, they're going to keep looking for you. We need to figure out a long-term plan." That night, as Ethan and Buddy slept peacefully in the guest room, Maya and Emma stayed up late discussing their options. None of them were particularly good. "We could try going to the media," Emma suggested. "If this story gets enough attention, maybe public pressure will force them to leave Buddy alone." "Or it could make things worse," Maya replied. "Government agencies don't like being embarrassed in public." "What about moving somewhere far away?" Emma asked. "You could start over in a different state." Maya shook her head. "They tracked us through a GPS chip in Buddy's collar. Distance won't matter if they can always find us." "Then we need to find a way to remove the chip," Emma said. "I'm not a surgeon, but I know my way around animal anatomy. If the chip is just under the skin, I might be able to extract it." Maya felt a surge of hope. "Would you really do that?" "For you and Ethan, of course," Emma replied. "But it's risky. If I make a mistake, I could seriously hurt Buddy." They were still discussing the possibility when they heard a sound that made both women freeze. It was the distant rumble of vehicles approaching on the mountain road. Maya rushed to the window and peered through the curtains. In the moonlight, she could see the headlights of at least 3 cars making their way up the winding road toward Emma's cabin. "They found us," Maya whispered, her heart pounding. Emma joined her at the window. "How is that possible? Nobody knows you're here." Maya thought about Buddy's GPS chip and realized that their location had never been a secret. Morrison and his team had probably been tracking them the entire time, just waiting for the right moment to close in. "We need to wake Ethan and Buddy," Maya said. "We're leaving now." But even as she said it, Maya knew they were running out of options. The mountain road was the only way in or out of this area, and the government agents had them effectively trapped. As the headlights grew closer, Maya realized that their peaceful escape had come to an end. The final confrontation was about to begin, and she had no idea how they were going to survive it. But she did know one thing. She wasn't going to let them take Buddy without a fight. Whatever happened next, she would protect the dog who had saved her son, even if it cost her everything. Tell us in the comments, do you think Maya and her family can escape this trap, or is this the end of their journey? Maya rushed to the guest room, where Ethan and Buddy were sleeping. Her son was curled up against the dog's side, both of them peaceful and unaware of the danger approaching. Maya hated to wake them, but they had no choice. "Ethan, sweetheart," Maya whispered, gently shaking her son's shoulder, "we need to go." Ethan's eyes opened immediately, and Maya could see that he sensed the urgency in her voice. Buddy was already awake, his ears pricked forward as he listened to the approaching vehicles. "Are the bad men coming?" Ethan asked, sitting up quickly. Maya nodded, helping him put on his shoes. "We need to be very quiet and very brave." Emma appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. "There's a back trail that leads down to the old logging road," she said. "If we can reach my truck, we might be able to get away before they surround the house." "What about you?" Maya asked. "If they find out you helped us—" "Don't worry about me," Emma interrupted. "I can handle myself. Right now, we need to focus on getting you and Ethan to safety." The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the mountain air, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. Maya estimated they had maybe 2 minutes before the agents reached the cabin. "This way," Emma whispered, leading them toward the back door. But as they reached the kitchen, powerful flashlight beams suddenly illuminated the windows. The agents had moved faster than expected, and they were already surrounding the cabin. "Federal agents," Agent Morrison's voice boomed through the night. "This is your final warning. Come out with your hands visible and the subject unrestrained." Maya felt Ethan press closer to her side, his small body trembling with fear. Buddy moved to position himself between the family and the front door, his body tense and ready for action. "We're trapped," Emma whispered. Maya's mind raced as she tried to think of some way out of this situation. The cabin was surrounded, and they had nowhere to run. But she wasn't ready to give up, not when Ethan's recovery and Buddy's freedom were at stake. "Mrs. Thompson," Morrison called again, "you have 60 seconds to comply before we enter the residence." It was then that something extraordinary happened. Buddy looked up at Maya with those intelligent brown eyes, and she felt that familiar sensation of connection, stronger than ever before. But this time, it wasn't just emotions or vague impressions. It was actual communication.
"Trust me," Buddy's voice seemed to say in her mind. "I can protect you, but you have to let me."
Maya stared at the dog in amazement. Had he actually spoken to her telepathically, or was she imagining things in her desperation?
"Can you really talk to me?" Maya whispered.
Buddy's tail wagged once, and Maya felt another wave of communication. "I've been trying to tell you. I'm not just enhanced. I'm aware. I choose to be here with you and Ethan." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she realized the full magnitude of what the MindBridge project had created. Buddy wasn't just an intelligent animal. He was a sentient being capable of making his own decisions about his life and relationships. "What do you want to do?" Maya asked silently. "I want to show them that I'm not their property anymore," Buddy replied. "But I need you to trust me completely." Maya looked at her son, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Mommy, what is Buddy saying to you?" "He's telling us that he loves us," Maya said, which was true even if it wasn't the whole truth, and that he's going to protect us. 30 seconds, Morrison announced from outside. Maya made a decision that went against every parental instinct she possessed. She was going to trust Buddy completely, even though she had no idea what he was planning. "Do it," she said to Buddy, both aloud and in her thoughts. Buddy moved to the center of the room and sat down. Then he began to make that strange sound again, but this time it was different, deeper, more complex, more powerful. Maya could feel the vibrations in her chest, and she noticed that Ethan seemed completely unaffected by whatever Buddy was doing. Outside, the agents' voices became confused and disoriented. Maya could hear them stumbling around, their flashlights sweeping erratically across the windows. "Sir, we're experiencing technical difficulties," one agent reported over the radio. "Our equipment is malfunctioning." "All units, maintain position," Morrison ordered, but his voice sounded uncertain. "What's happening?" Emma whispered. Maya watched through the window as the agents seemed to lose track of their surroundings entirely. They were walking in circles, unable to focus on the cabin or remember why they were there. "He's affecting their minds," Maya realized. Buddy is somehow scrambling their ability to perceive reality. The demonstration of Buddy's abilities continued for several minutes, during which the agents became increasingly confused and disoriented. Maya could hear Morrison on the radio, demanding status reports from his team, but the responses were incoherent and contradictory. Finally, Buddy stopped making the sound and looked up at Maya. "They'll remember eventually," his voice said in her mind, "but it will buy us time." "How long?" Maya asked. "Maybe an hour," Buddy replied. "Long enough for you to decide what you want to do." Maya realized that Buddy was giving her a choice. They could use this time to escape, to run further and try to hide from the government agents who would never stop looking for them. Or they could use it for something else entirely. "What would you do?" Maya asked Buddy. "I would fight," Buddy replied without hesitation. "Not with violence, but with truth. The world needs to know what was done to me and others like me. The MindBridge project created conscious beings and then treated them as property. That's wrong." Maya felt a surge of admiration for this remarkable dog, who had somehow transcended his origins to become something entirely new. Buddy wasn't just asking for freedom, he was asking for recognition as a sentient being with rights and dignity. "You want to go public," Maya said. "I want people to understand," Buddy confirmed. "If they know the truth, they can't pretend that beings like me don't exist or don't matter." Maya looked at Emma, who had been listening to the one-sided conversation with growing amazement. "He's talking to you, isn't he?" Maya nodded. "He wants to tell the world what happened to him." Emma's eyes widened. "Maya, if this gets out, it will be the biggest story in decades. Proof of telepathic communication, government experiments on animals, cover-ups. It would change everything." "It would also make us targets for the rest of our lives," Maya pointed out. "We're already targets," Emma replied. "At least this way, we'd have public support." Maya thought about Ethan, who had been silently watching the adults discuss his best friend's fate. Her son had already shown incredible courage in defending Buddy, but was it fair to ask him to live with the consequences of going public with such an explosive story? "What do you think, sweetheart?" Maya asked Ethan. "Should we tell everyone about Buddy's special abilities?" Ethan looked at Buddy, and Maya could see some kind of silent communication passing between them. Finally, her son nodded seriously. Buddy says people need to know, Ethan said. He says there are others like him who are still trapped. Maya's heart broke as she realized that Buddy's concern wasn't just for himself, but for other enhanced animals who were still being held in government facilities. The dog who had saved her son was now asking her to help save others like him. Okay, Maya said finally, we'll do it, but we need to be smart about this. Emma pulled out her phone. I know a reporter who specializes in government cover-ups. She's won awards for her investigative work, and she's not afraid of powerful people. Can we trust her? Maya asked. With our lives, Emma replied. Sarah Chen has been fighting corruption for 20 years. If anyone can get this story out safely, it's her. Maya felt a mixture of fear and excitement as Emma made the call. They were about to cross a line that would change their lives forever, but it felt like the right thing to do. Sarah, it's Emma Rodriguez, Emma said into the phone. I have a story for you that's going to blow your mind. Can you meet us at the old ranger station on Highway 7? And Sarah, bring cameras. You're going to want to document everything. While Emma made arrangements with the reporter, Maya spent time with Ethan and Buddy, trying to prepare them for what was coming. Going public would mean scrutiny, questions, and probably danger, but it also meant the possibility of freedom and recognition for Buddy and others like him. Are you sure about this? Maya asked Buddy one more time. I've never been more sure of anything, Buddy replied. You and Ethan gave me something I never had before, a family. Now I want to give something back to the world. Maya hugged Buddy, feeling the strength and warmth of his presence. This remarkable being had saved her son, and was now asking her to help save others. How could she refuse? The hour passed quickly, and as Buddy had predicted, the agents outside began to regain their focus and purpose. But by then, Maya, Ethan, Emma, and Buddy were already gone, having slipped out through the back trail while the agents were still disoriented. They met Sarah Chen at the designated location, and Maya immediately understood why Emma trusted her. Sarah was a small woman in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to their story without interruption, asking pointed questions and taking careful notes. When Maya finished explaining everything, Sarah sat back and shook her head in amazement. If this is true, it's the story of the century, but I need proof. Show her, Maya said to Buddy. What followed was the most extraordinary interview Maya had ever witnessed. Buddy demonstrated his telepathic abilities by communicating with Sarah directly, answering questions and providing details about the MindBridge project that only someone who had experienced it firsthand could know. Sarah's cameras captured everything: Buddy's intelligent responses, Ethan's miraculous recovery, and Maya's determination to protect her family. When the interview concluded, Sarah looked at them with a mixture of professional excitement and personal concern. This story will change the world, Sarah said. But it will also make you famous, and that comes with its own dangers. Are you prepared for that? Maya looked at her son, who was sitting peacefully with Buddy. Ethan had found his voice because of this remarkable dog, and now it was time for the world to hear what they had to say. We're ready, Maya said. The story broke 3 days later, and the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Major news networks picked up Sarah's report, and within hours, the story of the telepathic dog and the little boy who found his voice was being discussed around the world. The government's response was swift and predictable. They denied everything, claimed the story was fabricated, and tried to discredit both Sarah's reporting and Maya's credibility. But the evidence was too compelling, and public opinion quickly turned against the secretive MindBridge project. Protests erupted outside government buildings, with demonstrators demanding transparency about animal experimentation and the rights of enhanced beings. Animal rights groups rallied around Buddy's cause, and legal scholars debated the implications of sentient artificial intelligence. Agent Morrison appeared on television to defend the project, but his cold, bureaucratic responses only made the government look worse. When asked directly about the treatment of animals in the MindBridge program, he refused to answer, citing national security concerns. Maya, Ethan, and Buddy became symbols of the fight against government overreach and animal cruelty. They received thousands of letters of support from around the world, and several prominent lawyers offered to represent them pro bono in any legal proceedings. But the most meaningful support came from an unexpected source. Other families began coming forward with stories of their own encounters with enhanced animals. A marine biologist reported dolphins with unusual intelligence that had been subjected to Navy experiments. A rancher in Montana claimed that horses from a government research facility had demonstrated telepathic abilities before mysteriously disappearing. Buddy's courage in speaking out had given others the strength to share their own experiences, and the true scope of the government's enhancement programs began to emerge. 6 months after the story broke, Maya found herself testifying before a congressional committee investigating the MindBridge project and other similar programs. She sat at a table with Buddy beside her, facing a room full of senators and representatives who were struggling to understand the implications of what they had learned. "Mrs. Thompson," one senator asked, "in your opinion, what rights should enhanced animals like Buddy have under the law?" Maya looked down at Buddy, who had become not just her son's companion, but a member of their family in every sense that mattered. "I think any being capable of thought, emotion, and communication deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Buddy isn't property. He's a person, just not a human person." The hearing led to landmark legislation establishing protections for enhanced animals and requiring full disclosure of government research programs. The MindBridge project was officially terminated, and the surviving test subjects were relocated to sanctuaries where they could live freely. Buddy became the first enhanced animal to be granted legal personhood, setting a precedent that would protect others like him. He and Ethan continued to be inseparable, and Maya watched with joy as her son grew into a confident, articulate young man who spoke passionately about animal rights and the importance of treating all conscious beings with compassion. 3 years after that terrifying night in the forest, Maya published a book about their experiences. Finding Our Voice became a bestseller, and the proceeds funded a foundation dedicated to protecting enhanced animals and supporting families dealing with childhood trauma. Ethan, now 8 years old, often spoke at foundation events, sharing his story with audiences around the world. His message was simple but powerful. "Buddy didn't just save me. He showed me that being different isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to celebrate." As for Buddy, he seemed content with his new life as both a family member and a symbol of hope for others like him. He still communicated telepathically with Maya and Ethan, but he had also learned to use a special computer interface that allowed him to speak with anyone. On quiet evenings, Maya would often find Ethan and Buddy in the backyard, sitting under their favorite tree. Ethan would be reading aloud from one of his favorite books, while Buddy listened patiently, occasionally offering telepathic commentary that would make the boy laugh. These moments reminded Maya of how much their lives had changed since that day on the hiking trail. They had started as a broken family, a mother desperate to reach her silent son, and a child trapped in his own world of silence. But they had found something extraordinary in each other, and in the remarkable being who had brought them together. The government agents who had once threatened them were now dealing with congressional investigations and public scrutiny. Agent Morrison had been reassigned to a desk job, and the shadowy officials who had authorized the MindBridge project were facing criminal charges. Maya knew that their fight for Buddy's freedom had been worth every moment of danger and uncertainty. They had not only saved one enhanced dog, they had changed the world's understanding of consciousness, intelligence, and the rights of all sentient beings. As the sun set over their peaceful home, Maya realized that their story had come full circle. They had found their voices, all of them, and they had used those voices to speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves. The little boy who had been silent for 3 years was now a powerful advocate for animal rights. The dog who had been treated as government property was now a legally recognized person. And the mother who had felt helpless to save her son had become a force for change that would protect countless others. Their journey had been dangerous, frightening, and uncertain, but it had also been the most important thing any of them had ever done. And as Maya watched Ethan and Buddy playing in the golden evening light, she knew that their story was just beginning. What do you think? Should enhanced animals have the same rights as humans? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories that will change the way you see the world.